In this episode of MUA TV, I'm going to be thinking about one of my favorite Aristotle quotes, and that is, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." I'm looking at this today to help us start thinking about how you can go about creating a really strong self-brand. Make sure that you have some top-notch personal branding in place, which will ultimately affect the success of your personal branding photography when it comes to documenting your business journey. Let's do it. You should think about subscribing to MUA TV if you like to keep things open and honest when it comes to the authenticity in your personal brand. Here I cover all of the tips and tricks that you need to know to make sure that we slay your personal branding photography and achieve your wildest business dreams. Don't forget to hit the bell when you subscribe and you'll be notified every single Friday when a new episode comes out. If you've always wondered how some people seem to have this powerful magnetic effect on their ideal audience to help them grow their business, but you haven't really experienced the same sort of great results in your business, then by the end of this episode, you're going to know exactly how to self-brand yourself, your business, and then ultimately your business photography. I've had my own photography business now for 8 years. One of my favorite things about being a personal branding photographer is that I get to talk at length about who people are without using any words. And I've proven this with lots of different ambitious entrepreneurs who operate in lots of different industries. So maybe you're next. And this really all comes down to a level of self-awareness. So the more that you understand who you really are and you accept that, the better your self-branding and your branded photography will be. You've got to be able to feel really comfortable with your personal branding photographer at the beginning of your relationship together. This way you can share exactly who you are, why you are this way, and what parts of that you want to share in your photography. When you're having a conversation with this, like a photographer, of course they're going to be making judgments about who you are as a person, but that's kind of normal, isn't it? When we all have conversations with different human beings, it's safe to say that they are making judgments about you as you're speaking to them. But what's different about a photographer conversation like this is they're going to be investigating ways that they can go about conveying this through photography for you. So it's really important to be as open and honest as you can at that stage of planning your photos. In fact, the more open that you are, the more creative fuel you're going to give to your photographer. Now, this leads me on to my first top tip of today, and that is to just make it very, very clear to you that even if you are really open and honest and self-aware about who you are as a person and how that affects you in the way that you do your business, you don't need to worry about it ending in a literal weird way in your photos. For instance, I've got an example for you. Let's say you have a conversation with your photographer and it's very clear early on that you are an incredibly ambitious person and you're very aware about this and you've done some work on yourself about this, and you share with your photographer that actually the reason you are so ambitious and driven is because of a relationship that you have with your father, and that happened in a tumultuous childhood, let's say. The photographer is going to be able to understand more about what makes you tick, but you don't need to worry that the photographer is then going to place all of these little fatherly figures in every single photo at the end result. It's never a literal interpretation, so you don't have to worry about all of your dark secrets being aired on a photograph. It should never look like that as the end result. We've already talked a little bit about this on this episode of MUA TV, and in this episode I talked about all of the things I think you need to have prepared in your brand in order to make sure that your photographer is correctly primed and is given everything that they could possibly need to make sure that your personal brand photo shoot goes really successfully. Now, one of the things in that episode is talking about your brand personality. If you haven't seen it, go back and take a look. I promise you, you won't be sorry. Documenting living a truly authentic life can be really scary for a lot of people, but really all it is just being honest about who you really are as a person. The very best personal brands are beautifully in line with the reality of who you are, and including all of your flaws as well. For instance, think about Gary Vee. Now, people love him and people hate him, and I think that the people who love him would agree that the way that he develops his salty rants and he gets really irate about certain things and incredibly passionate all blends in beautifully to the background that we know about him. He has had a lot of, it's in his culture, in fact, he says, to hustle and grind and work really, really hard, and in Gary's case, that has worked really well for him. He's a very successful man. Now, you're either going to absolutely love that about him or you're not. You're going to hate it. Another person, think about Beyonce. So you might really love Beyonce like I do, and you might really respect how she has been able to craft the way that her personal life is off limits. She doesn't open the doors to her home life. She's very private about her children, and all of that stuff is off limits. I like to think that that enhances the impact of her songs and her creativity when she talks about her feelings and she shares them through her art, through her music. Now, you might really love that about Beyonce and think that it makes her a better artist, or you might really hate that and you might not like her and you wish you could see her on all of those celeb pages, but you can't. And bringing it back down to earth then, this has actually worked really well for me as well. So flash back 8 years when I was setting up my own photography business for myself, I was really scared that people wouldn't think I was a real professional photographer. Despite being experienced and qualified, it was a really big fear that I had, that people wouldn't think I was legit. And I put all of my energy into trying to prove that I was real and legit and professional. So much so that I completely let myself go. I lost focus on who I am as Laura Pearman. I didn't look after myself, I didn't eat right, I didn't sleep right. I started wearing all these shabby, really cheap clothes because I didn't have any money, and I totally let myself go. Flash forward just a little way into me setting up the business then, and I used to get involved in a lot of these TFP collaboration shoots, and all that means is time for print. Nobody actually gets paid money when they're involved in this, but every single person on the shoot can take a copy of the image for free and use it as a portfolio piece to show how good they are at the thing that they do. Anyway, I was on this TFP collaboration shoot, and the makeup artist who was involved in that showed up late, and when she showed up, she looked like a dog's dinner. By this, I mean her hair was greasy, she didn't have any makeup on her face, and her leggings were see-through. Everyone on the photo shoot was talking about it, and it made me really embarrassed and really, really angry. I think the reason I was so furious is because at that time I was focused so much on trying to prove that I was professional, and I felt like if I was being associated with this person who wasn't very professional in my eyes, it was going to drag me down in some way. But I couldn't get over this anger about it, and I went on for a while, and I thought, right, okay, Laura, check yourself. Why is this making you so angry? And actually, looking back on it now, the reason I was so furious about it is because I was projecting all of my anger about me and the way that I looked onto this makeup artist. Now, moving forward a little bit, I started to niche down my business, and that is when I really saw a turning point. That is when I really noticed that I was able to dress a little bit more vintage. I felt like I had given myself permission to be more the real me instead of trying to be this professional photographer. So once in a while, if a swear word would drop in a conversation, it was fine. That's who I am as Laura Pearman, and that's what you're going to get when you hire me as a photographer. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm unprofessional. I was a lot more open about my real passion for music and how that can massively affect my creativity and my mood. And I just started being more me, but letting it run in tandem to the way that I wanted my business direction to go. I let myself open up and be my naturally bossy, forthright self with clients and with suppliers, and people seemed to really enjoy that about me. I was also very open as well for the first time in my adult life about my own experiences with anxiety and depression. I wasn't oversharing about it, but if it came up in a conversation in a professional setting, I was open and said, yeah, that's something that I deal with too. And I found that people were a lot more connected to me as a result of that. Over time then, at networking events and small conferences that I was doing at the time, I found I was becoming more memorable. People would come up to me and start conversations as if they already knew me. People would drop into conversation, oh yeah, it's fine, I know who you are, I know what you do, I've heard about you. And I started thinking that that was working well for me, and it seems to be going good so far. Now I am fully aware and I'm really accepting of the fact that all of me opening up like that and being more genuinely Laura was probably repelling certain people away. But I'm quite happy about that. I've noticed since making that change in my business and with who I am as a photographer, I have a lot nicer clients now. So I don't have people who are like really unreliable. I don't have people who seem to complain and want to make an issue of every single little bit of a photo shoot. People don't question me when I give them advice or I give them consultancy anymore. People like what I'm about and they trust me for it. So it's worked really well. Time for my second top tip of the day though. It's important to remember, even though I'm sharing about all the ways that I open up or the way that it's worked really well for Beyonce, the key to remember about self-branding is that it's not about the oversharing. So don't think that you need to just flick the switch and start documenting every single meal that you eat or airing your relationship drama on social media or even talking about this weird allergy that you have that might be quite freaky. If that doesn't work for you and your business, it's probably better to go with carefully curated sharing. Now that is very strategic, and sometimes the fact that it's strategic can make it feel a little inauthentic, but it's not. It's 100% honesty about who you are, but you're only sharing certain things about who you are. Now back on this episode of MUA TV, I go into a lot more detail about developing storylines and themes with your personal branding. So if you're finding on the back of this tip that you're not really sure where you want the scales to balance, I thoroughly recommend you go back and take a look at that episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know that you liked it, and be open with me in the comments about where you feel that you are when it comes to self-branding. If you've enjoyed learning about some self-branding with me today, then you are absolutely gonna love this episode of MUA TV. Here I talk about all of the things that I think you can start sharing in your personal branding photo shoot. So take a look at this episode and I'll help you get planning. Mwah! Now before you go anywhere, don't forget to subscribe. Mwah!